Hello and welcome back to the Comic Literate Podcast, the podcast that does deep dives into the best of comic books, graphic novels, and mangas. I'm your host, the soon-to-be known as Comic Stan, and with me as always is my marvellous co-host, is Jamie.
You need to fuck off with that shit.
What, the high energy or the marvellous?
The high energy's great.
Cool.
We love the energy coming in. It makes me come in hot. It's the fact that the adjectives have now just gone to things about the comic book, not just nice compliments.
It's called synergy. It's a corporate term, and it is very important.
We have a lot
capitalism.
We actually have a lot of brand synergy with Raid Shadow Legends. So if you'd like to,
look, as I said off the podcast, I've never played Raid Shadow Legends, but if they approach us, I'm gonna try it because if I actually enjoy it, I'll shill for it. That's the rules, I think.
Yeah.
If you enjoy the product, you can shill for it.
I really want Manscaped.
Yeah, we could do Manscaped.
They're the ones I want the most.
Is Manscaped, like, have they shifted entirely to, advertising-wise, have they shifted entirely to pubes, or do they still acknowledge the facial hair?
It's all pubes, man.
See, that's what I thought,
pubes, which I think is fucking hilarious.
I think that some brand of shaver had to be the first in this day and age to be like, what about pubic hair? Like, because none of them did for decades beforehand, ever.
It was just there was a quiet acceptance that it's like, I could also shave my balls with this razor.
People did wonder, right? There was a bit of a discussion about like how older people would be like, when did everyone start shaving their pubes? Like, it was like a thing that happened, right?
The boomers are just like, what happened to Bush, lads?
Exactly. And I think what happened was that in the birth of the internet, people started going on forums and going, by the way, how do you actually shave your balls? And then someone had like a detailed paragraph of like, here's everything you need to know. And they were like, all right, cool. And then we've slowly shifted to advertisers being like, people actually using these, not just for their faces.
But also, if you want a smooth sack, well, you guys.
Smooth as eggs. We're ready for Manscaped already.
So anyway.
But also, in an interesting note, and I feel like this is the kind of thing we always touch on things like these, is the women tax on razors and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, the pink tax on razors is obscene.
Which, as a man, and for any men listening, you can go your entire life without knowing about it because it just never comes up, and it's only if you get on that topic with a woman and they actually go, yeah, it's actually way more expensive than your stuff. So
it's the same.
It's an absolute travesty. It's the bloody patriarchy.
It's the same.
And just use whatever the cheapest, not the cheapest shaver, like the cheapest within like a reasonable amount, because the really cheap ones are dog shit.
So I don't really use razors, although the listener won't know, but I have shaved off a very magnificent beard and I feel real naked.
I mean, when you're used to a Gimli style beard for quite like almost a decade, anything less is going to feel naked.
I've realised I don't like the collars on any of my shirts because I'd never fucking seen them before, Ryan. Because they're always just hidden underneath all the... And now I can see my shirt collar.
Oh, now I have to do the top button. Oh.
Yeah, literally. Like I've had to start doing the top button of my shirt up when I wear a tie. It's awful.
I mean, it's definitely a first world problem, but that doesn't mean it's not a problem.
Yeah, first world problems are problems. What was I about to say? I was about to say
something about the intro, the high energy, or the... No, we passed that, didn't we?
Yeah, we got through that. We've
moved past that now.
Yeah, and it wasn't about shaving my balls, because that's private.
The absolute best part of a podcast is when the people go, what was I about to say?
And you just get to come on this journey with me as I work out what's going on.
I mean, I'll edit it down so it sounds a bit more coherent.
No!
There's some podcasts I listen to where they do the bare minimum editing and you just hear that gap for ages.
Yeah, I know.
And it's just like a little bit of like, just go into it, put it on double speed and just gonna chop those bits out.
Yeah, just lop it out. Excise that lump.
Exercise the demons of silence. Anyway... I will say I was a bit more...
This is a weird open. This is the weirdest opener we've had since that time I just went completely off book.
Oh, you're going to have to narrow it down a little more than that, surely.
You go into the woods today.
Oh, yeah. The only problem with that was how low... And you were doing it for, effect of the content. It had to be...
Yeah.
Yeah, you were trying to set a mood, attention. But with a podcast, I feel like if you open on that lower energy, people who are trying to be like, oh, this sucks. Turn this off. I came in high energy today only because I edited last week's episode and I was trying to mix it up a bit with the intro to be like, hello and welcome to, like that. And I realized like that's too low energy. Like that first one, it needs to be up there. It needs to be like, hey, podcast is awesome. Listen up.
I have to take a minute before we record to just be like, right, energy. Because if not, I'd just be like, all right. I've done that. For the listener, there are times when I've come in low energy and Ryan has walked into the next recording and went, like, right, I need you to cheer up today.
It almost got to a point where I was considering doing you might have seen the videos. The people are like Walmart or those kind of shops in America. They have like a group.
The greeter.
But no, they have the group like before they open the store. And some like, telecom phone kind of place as well. They'll get all the staff together, go, right, what are we here to do? And they'll like stomp, clap. And, yeah, exactly. Like, I think more recently it changed to the Wolf on Wall Street thing. The
Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which is great, but only in that film. As soon as you try and do it in real life, it's like, just stop.
Do you want to instigate pre-podcast huddles as a thing?
Maybe just like a chant, or we could do that rugby. What's the New Zealand rugby thing? We just scream at each other.
Do you want to start? Because I can learn how to do a haka. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, and then when we come in, it's like, hey, welcome to the podcast. Like it's up there.
We're really amped up.
Exactly. Yeah.
What are we talking about this week, Ryan?
We are talking about a 2014 title to a little bit of a movie tie-in. Like, God, what are the odds?
Every week.
Like every week. It's been a busy month. But we're doing the actual first introduction of the Ms.Marvel character, not the original Ms. Marvel, who is the Carol Danvers. We're doing the Kamala Khan 2014 one, which I thought would be interesting because she's a very popular character nowadays, and we've not done anything on her at all. I've not read that much about her except for some modern stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought it'd be interesting to dive back, turn the clock a little bit 9 years, and see what it was like around that time. So Kamala Khan, ordinary girl from Jersey City, until she suddenly got powers, and now she's Ms. Marvel, and she's a teenager, and she's Muslim, and she's an Inhuman, and all these other things. Also is written by a Willow Wilson, with art by Adrian Alphona, and color art by Ian Herring. Now, I thought I'd mention the color art first of all, because one of the first things I noticed with the art, and obviously the art is the first place we start nowadays. Like,
yeah, it's the standard, isn't it?
Door open, first thing you see. I thought the drawing, I liked the style. I liked the drawn by hand kind of roughness of it.
I had some issues.
I mean, you had 5 of them to read specifically. got him.
That's a good pun.
It's
well
amazing
done.
that I've not made it yet. This is my first issue-based pun.
We need a pun counter. Ding when the pun happens.
We don't do many puns, so that would be a rare one. But
yeah, that would be like, because I always try to instigate these things, and then like they happen for an episode, and then you're just like, fuck it, he won't notice.
Yeah, but they feel fresh when it's only one episode. It's like a fresh kind of thing every time. I'll put in a pun counter for that one pun.
There was one thing that the artist didn't seem very good at drawing, and it was quite key. It wasn't very good at drawing hands. The hands were a bit janky.
So I only really noticed the hands when they were big hands.
Well, but this is the problem. When you're writing a superhero whose ability is make my hand real big, you need to be
big and specifically.
You need to be good at drawing the hands, because if not, you've just got all of these close-ups of these really janky hands. Now, hands are hard. Hands are really hard to draw. I get it. Like, I'm not casting any aspersions here. They just didn't look very good.
I saw a webcomic recently, and it was about how an artist was practicing things they weren't as good at, and they were practicing feet. And someone was like, "Oh yeah, is that a made to request?"
I feel like for artists, they don't like to practice feet too much, because they're like, I don't want people to think I'm just really into feet.
And unfortunately, there's big money in feet.
It's weird how like the classic body parts that people like to objectify have kind of fallen out of fashion a bit. People are just really into feet these days.
So
I feel like the 20 teens and the 2020s have been the age of the foot fetish.
I mean, they felt proud enough to come out, and I think the reason is all the kinks and preferences became a bit more spoken about with the rise of the internet and everything. I feel like the foot people, and I don't think that's a derogatory term. I think that's the foot people is like it's an encompassing term. I feel like they were looking at all the more extreme kinks that people were openly talking about and be like, ours is not that bad.
My foot thing is fine.
I almost want to take a stance on this, but with the very clear...
No caveat. Take your stance.
The very
Just
clear caveat that I am not a part of the foot community.
Yeah, all right.
But from the
lady doth protest too much.
And that's exactly what I was worried about. But I feel like from the outside, looking in, and because there's a stigma, people are like, oh, they're into feet. Like, oh. I feel like all they're into is a part of the body that most other people aren't. Like, but it's relative to other kinks and preferences and whatever, it's very normal.
It's pretty tame.
It's a part of the body. Like normal, normal is a relative term.
Yes.
But for people who aren't into feet, us normies.
How the fuck have we got on here? How is this?
I've had this bottled up for ages. All I'm saying is that when we look at people, we go from the head, great, chest, great, pelvis, obviously, like legs. Some people are legs.
Some people are leg men.
Yeah, that's fine. And then we get to the ankle and below, and we go, oh no. It's like, why is this arbitrary line?
Whereas in the Victorian era, an ankle was considered to be pretty fucking raunchy. Actually, maybe the foot people are it's just a resurgence of Victorian morality where they're like, oh, gives a go on them ankles.
Maybe. And also, comparatively, if someone was like, I'm into hands, where would we be on that? Because I've never heard that. But like, if we're comparing everything, it's like, if someone's like, I love hands are my thing. Be like, yeah, hands are great. They do loads of stuff.
They're really useful.
Yeah, I'm big fans. They don't get me hot and bothered, but I'm like, but hands are pretty cool. Like,
I mean, it depends on what they're doing.
I mean, well, you could say that for anything, really, couldn't you? But
yeah, I suppose.
But anyway, back to the drawing.
Yeah, no.
I feel like I'm just defending the people who need a voice, and that is the foot people in this instance.
Should we make a foundation? A foundation.
The foot foundation.
The foot fetishist foundation.
Literally the foundation of the human body.
Oh my god, that's so good.
It's a slogan.
No, so yeah, the hands.
Yes.
The hands were janky.
Oh, speaking of bloody tangents. I'm not putting that in the episode description.
You have to. The convention that you've created in the way that you describe these on the internet dictates that you have to do it.
A small tangent on the foot fetish community. I'm not looking forward to writing it, but
but no, I didn't rate the way he drew hands, which I know it's a minor gripe, but when they're so fundamental to the character, it was just like, and I get it, because hands are, as I've said a moment ago, hands are really difficult to draw. They're probably the most difficult human body part because they're so intricate. There's so many little joints and they move in very particular ways. And so it's not inconceivable that having to draw so many hands would have been a challenge.
I will say, from my perspective, from my experience reading it, I think that I found the art generally to be of a style where I wasn't as concerned about something looking off.
Yeah, and overall, I quite liked the art. There was one other stylistic choice that they made that I found a little bit weird, is that they cartoonized older men a bit more than every other character. And so all of the other characters were quite straight, kind of, they were quite standard-looking humans.
Do you think that's an anime influence or manga influence?
No, because it's definitely really reminiscent of a more Western cartoonist style.
But the technique for mangas, I think I mentioned this in the previous episode.
We talked about it last week.
Basically, if anyone didn't listen to that, it's the main characters look more simpler drawn because people can put themselves in the characters easier than more detailed drawn characters.
So I've got an example here, and this is one of the policemen who turns up to the Kmart when they're being robbed, and he looks great, right? That's not a bad cartoon, but it's really cartoony in comparison to, say, Kamala, who, to be honest with you, is a really nailed on interpretation of what Middle Eastern people look like.
I feel like, and again, this is completely just my opinion, I'm not saying objectively, I think it is kind of the manga thing where because it's a young person's comic, so I think the young people look, again, more standard and put yourself into their shoes kind of thing, whereas the old, it's, like with any children's stuff, like the adults are like a kind of ethereal presence, and the
I mean, it's possible, but
children and teenagers are like the people who we are following.
I mean, I think the reasoning behind it is less interesting to me than just the very fact of it as a creative choice.
Yeah.
Did you notice it?
I didn't notice it actually specifically. It's only because you now brought it up that I thought about the manga reference.
But in retrospect, can you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I completely see it. I see the point you're making, and I think the only thing we're kind of differing on is whether it did benefited or hindered it.
Yeah, and I'm not. And again, I don't dislike it particularly. Like, it's most prominent in Kamala's dad. Because obviously we see a lot of him. And we see a lot of him right next to Kamala and her brother, who both, by the way, look great.
What's interesting, though, is the brother being a little older. I think he is almost a bit in between, actually. He's got a kind of an odder-shaped head. He's unusually, like, tall and lanky, which some people do look like, but I feel he's kind of almost in between of, like, he's starting to look more different from the teenagers because he's a bit older, but he's not so detailed as the adults. But again, I don't know if that's intentional or not.
I do really like the colour work.
I was going to complain about the color work.
Really? Go for it.
I thought the colors were all unnecessarily muted.
Which I really rated. Like, if you look at this panel of Kamala when she first turns into the kind of Carol
Danvers.
Yeah, her Carol Danvers character model.
See, so bits like that, those splashed out more because they were a bit more contrasting.
Yeah.
So I see the use of it.
Yeah.
But I feel like when everything was muted, it felt a bit more boring. And I guess that's to do with the context, because those are normally the parts where she's just everyday family life or going to the mosque or just everyday stuff for her. So I get the use of it, but then I also feel like I'd prefer if it was a more contrasting color throughout the whole thing. What's interesting is the first panel is quite high relative to the rest of it's high contrast color, and it's a close-up of the BLTs.
Yeah.
And I was looking, I was like, those BLTs actually look really good. And then as soon as it kind of pans out and goes back to normal, it's like just muted colors.
I mean, we've both been to New York, right?
Yes.
New York is a very grey and brown city.
Yeah.
And I imagine New Jersey, built around the same time from the same building materials, probably.
Yeah, definitely similar.
Would look really similar, right? I mean, have you been to New Jersey? I've not.
I've not been in, but I've seen enough stuff it's set there that
Yeah, and so I kind of feel like it was a quite nailed on representation of what modern New Jersey would look like.
But then when you go into like their homes and stuff, like surely those parts would be a bit more vibrant, you know?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's really interesting that we both identified the same thing and we've come at it from completely different angles.
And it didn't break anything for me.
No,
it was like if I was just reading it to read a comic, I probably wouldn't have even paid any mind to it. But because we're doing this and I'm thinking about it, I'm like, actually, I don't like this part of it. But yeah, like it'll work for some people, and I recognize the tool it uses by being like, the exciting stuff is a bit more high contrast color, so it naturally looks more interesting.
And because when they were using the traditional Marvel characters, so they use Ms.Marvel, Captain America, and Iron Man, they're all super high contrast. They're all super bright. They are very much in the Marvel house style. And particularly in the scene where we're seeing what she's imagining when she's writing her fanfic, did you notice that was a bit brighter and a bit more high contrast?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
And that was it. I thought there was this interesting kind of interpretation of the standard Marvel house style, because it wasn't quite nailed on to what those characters would look like in their own comics, but it was a bit closer to the standard Marvel house style.
Yeah.
And I think that was used in a really interesting way. Yeah. And I quite liked that. And again, when she goes to the party and she's walking through the fog, I thought the fog looked great.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I really got a sense that the whole city was being engulfed in this kind of swampy, soupy fog, you know? I found it. Yeah, I really enjoyed the color work. I thought the whole thing, it gave the artwork a breathiness that I liked.
This is definitely gonna be a personal preference kind of thing. I feel like only now thinking about it, I feel like when I've seen it in like TV shows and films, I've had the same complaint retroactively thinking about it. When you get like a TV show or something where something's set quite dull, but it's meant to be dull, and then the something happens and the new adventure happens, suddenly everything's bright. I've been watching those and felt that same kind of like, why did it have to be so dull in the previous parts? Like I get if you're doing just a little, you know, Wizard of Oz, prime example, black and white at the start and then color for the adventure,
comes
right?
in,
because it's such a small part of the start. For me, that works a lot better because it's very much here's the boring life, big adventure starts, and that's the whole film. But if they kept going in, and if there was more of that black and white part, I'd be like, this is boring. Like this makes me feel like this part's boring. Why don't we get back to the contrast?
I think there's an interesting conversation to be had about form and function, because obviously The Wizard of Oz was the first Technicolor film.
Yeah.
And so
things become in color. People in the cinema was like, Jesus Christ!
And
like,
this is it. And they did it for that reason. They did it so that this new technology they'd developed could have the biggest possible impact. But it's interesting because it was done explicitly for that reason, but it's now become this really interesting creative choice that people read into, as you just did.
Yeah.
And you know, it's where form meets function, isn't it? And that's quite interesting to me in the way we tell stories, because you're using the past limitations of a medium to set an expectation that you then subvert to get a reaction out of the audience.
I think the problem for me is that I'm comparing this comic naturally to other comics that were very vibrant throughout the whole thing that I enjoyed more. So I understand the form, but it's my personal reaction to it. I'm like, I'd rather it just be contrasted the whole way.
Which is fair. But again, what did you think of the actual line art?
Again, I liked the hand-drawnness, the crookedness of like some of the parts. I liked and generally found funny how there's a certain distance, and we've seen a few comics that do this. There's a certain distance where, for lack of a better term, if the view is far enough away from characters, their faces become two dots in a line. Yeah, and I like that. Like, that's a stylistic choice. I like that. I think it's funny. Like, it made me kind of chuckle every time.
And I think the other thing is that the artists really nailed the character models, particularly for Kamala. Like, she looked like a believable,
like an unassuming young teenage girl.
Yeah, she did. But her like, there's such a strong focus on ethnicity in this. And so I think it's really important that they absolutely fucking nailed that, and they did. They knocked it out of the park. Like, she looks to me to be a really believable Pakistani woman. And I just think that with what they were playing with, particularly with the really sensitive discussion that was being had around Islam in America at this time, I mean, for the past 20 years, really, it's been a really sensitive topic. I think it's really important that they did a good job of representing a believable Muslim family. And part of that is making them look right. And they did, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that did a lot of the legwork for me with the art. It's just the fact that they nailed down some really core key things that had to be there. Because, you know, there is that sometimes you see people that are drawn and you're like, that's just a white person that they've shaded brown.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But actually here they did a really good job.
Yeah. Being accurate is the best thing I think you can do to pay respect to portraying people, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And am I right in saying this is the first time that Marvel had presented a Muslim character?
I don't know about just characters generally, but absolutely the first main character being Muslim. So the first title character being a Muslim character. So it was a big deal for that.
Yeah, and I suppose getting into the story a bit, I think their portrayal of a Muslim family and of Islam in general was very sensitive, actually.
Well, to get into a bit of that, which I thought would be interesting, the writer, Willow Wilson, so she is a American-born New Jerseyan, maybe. But yeah, she was born in New Jersey, so that's why it's said there, obviously. She actually converted to Islam later in life. So that's
cool.
Her kind of in of, you know, knowing everything and having the relevant information. And there's a little bit interesting it's on the Wikipedia page for if you want to go read it, but I thought it was interesting. They actually mentioned specifically the creating of the Kamala Khan character. So to read a little excerpt from that, they said, what's interesting, before settling on her Pakistani heritage, the two debated, I think it was her and a existing Marvel person, Senior Vice President David Gabriel.
Yeah.
So they were kind of going back and forth on like the ideas before they hired her, like, we want to make a Muslim superhero character. So that's the basis. You choose to go from here.
It is much zeitgeist, very good.
Yeah, which is a reference to the comic. Much wow.
That they hired a Muslim woman to write this character about a Muslim woman. I think that's powerful.
Yeah. So
it's absolutely the right fucking choice here.
Yeah. So they said before settling on her Pakistani heritage, the two debated the idea of making her a Somali American girl. So it's interesting. While creating the Kamala as a character, the duo expected negativity, not just from people who are anti-Muslim, but also Muslims who believed Kamala should be portrayed in a certain way.
Yeah.
But then it says, despite the initial fears, Kamala was received positively. Some sources described her as easy to relate to, and even likening her to a modern-day Peter Parker.
Yeah, I got that.
Yeah.
Totally got that.
The thing with that is I think they're right. Like I think they've done the modern version of the Peter Parker archetype.
Yeah, kind of.
The only problem for me with that is it in itself, it is a kind of a wornish trope. So while I think they've been very successful at modernizing it and rejuvenating it, you still, I think, fall into the pit traps of like, we've seen the broad journey before of the young person who, like, the superpower is likening to puberty, the allegory for puberty. And we've seen that a couple of times. And it even made me think, how many times do we see an adult person suddenly with superpowers? And does that automatically become like a puberty allegory? Body changing and new experiences and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Or is it only when it's a teenager?
Yeah, no, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose a good example of an adult getting powers is the original Thor run, where the bloke picks up the hammer and gets the power of Thor. And again, that really does have the undertones of puberty, doesn't it? Because he becomes bigger and more well-muscled. And
I would say that for me, the reason it doesn't is because at that time, it was a thing he could turn on and off.
Yeah, maybe actually. Whereas this is more of a permanent change, isn't it?
And same with Spider-Man. It was like, you have these powers now. This is you from now on, kind of thing.
I think one of the interesting things is that the acquisition of her power speaks to a very real thing that happens to a lot of people of color growing up in the West. She's this buying into Western beauty standards. And so something that Kamala talks about is wanting blonde hair. And I think that's a very real thing that happens because beauty standards in particularly, Britain, America, Germany, kind of Western European countries are really, really strongly linked to Caucasian traits, right? And that's obviously a really sad fact because it's wholly untrue.
Yeah.
But I think they did a really good job of representing that here and also of empowering her and, taking that character on a very brief arc, but I think a well-executed arc towards an acceptance of herself as what and who she is, right?
I mean, interestingly, I've read some modern-day Kamala Khan stuff, and what's interesting is I didn't know that she had the power to actually change how she looks.
Yeah.
I knew she could make herself bigger and smaller and make body parts bigger and smaller, and that's all I've ever seen from her in the modern stuff. I didn't know she could not only change how she looks, she could also change her clothes. Like the power, as we see later in this 5-issue run, the first volume, we see that the power can extend to her clothes, but it's an extra usage of a power.
Yeah.
So she says when she attempts to be a superhero and do the superhero fighting, she's not as good because her power is being drained to affecting the costume and making that bigger and smaller. But yeah, I didn't know. Obviously, they've used that as a good thing early on of you could change how you look. As a superhero with an alter ego, that's a really good thing. But she very quickly recognizes that the thing she would naturally draw to is the Western beauty standards. Yeah. And specifically the person she idolizes in Carol Danvers. Yeah. So, and she talks about the skimpy outfit that's no longer PC or...
Yeah, so I don't know much about Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel. Was Carol Danvers' original costume as Ms. Marvel one of those kind of old superhero female costumes that were a bit that way?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't one of the worst, but
Supergirl's was always pretty egregious with the diamond shaped cutout, right?
Power Girl, yeah.
Power
and
Girl,
she's like a Supergirl, type, and that's just ridiculous.
Was that Marvel or DC?
DC. The fact they keep doing that, they still have it on her, and it's it's traditional. We can't just
it's the white costume, isn't it?
Yeah, just change it. But she's not one of the worst. But that Ms. Marvel costume definitely falls under the why is the female superhero showing more skin than the male superheroes?
And just on a functional level, those super suits often. They're kind of armor, aren't they? A lot of the time, they function as armor, and
sometimes,
you're like, why would you want a bit missing?
I think that more relates to fantasy stuff, where armor's a big part.
It's always so funny where the male, the mask version of the armor is a full suit of mail.
Yeah.
And then the femme version is just a fucking
bikini.
steel bikini. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that definitely was a factor in earlier superheroes, and they've luckily moved away from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're working to redress it, but I suppose the problem is that it's still a prominent part of the culture and a part of the history.
Yes.
And so it's fun that she references it, and it's fun that she sort of says, well, actually, that's what I want.
Yeah. I think that's a good part generally, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting.
Getting into the story, I thought, would this be a fun one for you to tell us what the story is of this volume that we're covering?
No.
Come on.
I'm not here for that.
Come on.
I'm not here for it.
Right, so I'm a human being who hasn't
read. Fuck off.
I've not read any of this, but I've heard, ooh, Ms.Marvel, Kamala Khan. Should I jump into it?
I don't like doing this, Ryan, because it's never good.
It's interesting.
I think it's never good. They're all my descriptions are always really bad.
Yeah, but you make them bad on purpose to try and make me not ask you to do them.
No, it's not weaponized incompetence. I'm just not very good at it.
That's what weaponized incompetence people say, though.
Weaponized incompetence people. Are you turning them into a community as well now?
I literally I take the thing and then add people at the end, and that's how I do it.
I mean, that's kind of how language works, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Give us a brief. What happens in the story?
Young New Jerseyan woman walks through some fog, acquires superpowers, and rescues her friend's dipshit brother.
Yeah, well, that's the basics, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm not... Look, right? You can't make me do this and then complain at my answer. I noted the hint of passive aggression in there.
It was the teacher mentally being like, that's a C.
And I like that you try and build up this teacher-student relationship between you and I, because we both know that in this relationship, you're wearing the silly braid and I've got the robe on.
When it comes to superheroes, yeah.
I mean, I don't think you got the obvious Star Wars reference there, did you?
I got the robe part and the braid I had to think about a bit. I mean, that's specifically the Anakin Obi-Wan relationship?
No, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan.
Did Qui-Gon have a braid?
No, but Obi-Wan did.
Oh, back then, yeah.
Yeah.
But they both had robes, so...
Yeah, but... Right, okay. It falls apart a little bit. What I'm saying is that, Ryan, I am the master. I'm actually wearing a robe right now as well.
Yeah, but when it comes to superheroes, there's a very clear master and Padawan.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, okay, maybe.
When it comes to everything else that we talk about, you're normally the master, but this is my domain.
We're in my domain now, boy.
What would you say? I think this is an interesting point. As someone who's not a superhero fan and has more limited experience with superheroes, would you say, are there points you could point to that separate this from the more traditional... I mean, this is an origin story, so more traditional super origin stories that you know or read.
Yes, purely because I think they're doing something really interesting here where they're trying to tell a story about balancing religion up against modern Western values and culture.
Yeah.
And so... I don't necessarily think that we've ever had that story as a superhero story.
Mm.
We see it a little bit with Miles Morales, where he's kind of, he's navigating the complications of being a highly intelligent young black man in America, right?
Black Hispanic.
Yeah, and so, he's mixed race. There's a lot of, we see glimpses of him, kind of navigating the cultural expectations from his family up against the cultural expectations of wider society. I think that's done better here than I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the thing for me that sets this apart from other superhero origin stories, is that clearly it's a very knowing take on Muslim culture.
Mm.
And I don't think I've seen that in a comic book before. And so that to me was really fascinating and I found it really interesting. And again, speaking as a white man,
straight white cis male.
Yeah, speaking as a cishet white man, I believe the term is.
Straight white cis men people.
How far can we abstract this before it becomes meaningless? Obviously, who doesn't know a lot about that culture? And I know a little bit about Islam, but no more than anyone else, I would suggest. I thought it was interesting just to see that represented, and I thought they did a really good job of it. I think. It was really fascinating watching her brother really connect with his religion.
A bit more fundamentalist.
A little bit more, yeah, but not a fundamentalist. He was just I think fundamentalist is the wrong word there because it comes with a lot of negative connotations.
Yeah, and I think those are added on by by Westerners. Like,
but that's how language works, isn't it? So I wouldn't say he was fundamentalist. I would say he was devout.
More devout than the rest of the family.
More devout than his father, certainly.
Which is interesting, because to us, from outsiders, you don't think about these little nuances. Because as closer relation, we have like Christianity, and normally you have very Christian families. I don't know about your experience, but like anyone I've known, you normally have very Christian families, and then occasionally you have a younger child, teenager person who is maybe rebelling or just not following the same, beliefs as the rest of the family. So it's interesting here to see that kind of different levels across the generations.
But the difference there is that when you have a highly Christian family in the West, they're not abstracted from their culture in any way.
No, yes.
And so their parents are practicing in the church that they possibly even practiced in as children and that they came up through, possibly even the church they got married in and that their children were christened in. What we're seeing here is a Pakistani family where the parents are first-generation immigrants and the children are second-generation immigrants, right? And so Kamala and her brother they're reconnecting with a heritage that they haven't fully experienced because they grew up in America. And you can see that would be a really natural response to it. This thing of like, well, the world is telling me I'm this thing. The world is telling me I'm different for this reason. So I'm going to fucking immerse myself in that. And I'm going to draw strength from that. And I'm really going to live that and breathe it and learn about it because I don't get to experience my culture natively. So I'm going to immerse myself in it as much as I can. And I thought they did a really clean job of representing it without labouring the point.
Yeah. Making it a part of the story without it being a focus.
Yeah, and I just thought it was interesting. Yeah. And then obviously you've got Kamala's more relaxed relationship with her religion, and then her friend who is a bit more devout, and her friend is wearing a headdress.
The hijab?
A hijab, yeah. I mean, again, I wouldn't like to name it specifically because I'm not.
We could be wrong. We very well could be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm not an expert on these things, but she's wearing some form of headdress to cover her hair.
Yeah.
And she makes it very clear that actually that's a choice that she has made, and that her parents are like, oh, it's a phase, she'll get over it. And her parents aren't super interested in her doing that, but that's her reconnecting with her culture, right?
Yeah.
And so it was really cool seeing these representations of these young people living in the West, finding a way to integrate Islam into their life as young people in America. And I just thought that was interesting, and we've not really seen that before.
Yeah. I think with stuff like this, I always have like a two reactions one after the other. The first one is
dissonance.
Well, not at the same time. Normally one followed by the other. The first one is normally like, oh, it's cool seeing this like real representation of a community that I wouldn't normally otherwise see. And then the second one is, I hope that it's an accurate representation because I don't know. Like if it's presented to me, I don't have the relevant experience to say, oh, that's accurate. So it's a bit of a relief for me to think that and then read, as I read earlier, that a lot of people are like, yes, this is accurate and we're glad to see it. Because then I'll be like, oh, good, it is the accurate representation. So
yeah, I suppose this is the thing when you're seeing a representation of a culture that you have very little experience of, you're like, is this authentic?
And this is why I think we always say with stuff like this, if you want to hear specifically the Muslim and Islam connotations of this comic, you should seek out a Muslim comic book fan who is talking about it and get their input.
And I imagine those people will exist for this. I imagine there will be the people who have done that reading.
I mean, hopefully more so now than the past. Like,
yeah, because again, that's not a reading of this comic that either of us are really equipped to do.
Exactly. So if you're looking for that, those are the people you should go to for that. For that input.
And obviously one of the things that I like to do sometimes is read around the comic book a little bit and, just kind of come in with a little bit of wider context because that's what I'm good for. And I didn't do that here because I kind of felt that with a topic that is as vast as an ancient religion that's been going for thousands of years.
One of the oldest, if not the oldest.
Yeah, like, I mean, I'm not 100% sure on the timelines there, but I think it is the oldest, isn't it?
It's the oldest of the modern day monotheocratic. I'm making up words here.
Monotheistic.
Sure, yes.
Yeah, and well, it's the oldest of the sand religions, isn't it? So Judaism, Christianity, Islam, they're known as the sand religions because of where they come from. It's the oldest of the three, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, any reading I did on it, I felt would be too surface level to be actually that interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But
exactly. So I think from here on, the focus, we're going to be more focusing on the comic book as a comic book and as a story and as
100%. But I thought it was really important to touch on it up front because it is such a central theme.
Of course.
And just to say, I mean, we talk a lot of shit on this podcast.
As confirmed by the earlier discussion of the foot people.
I love that the narrative journey of this podcast has gone from foot fetishism to Islam, right?
the depiction of Islam in Western media.
Yeah. I mean,
we're a flexible group.
It's probably one of the most positive depictions I've seen. I think, I mean, it is one of the most positive depictions I've seen. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think we're really encouraged to like the Muslim characters a lot more than the non-Muslim characters. Yeah. Like, a lot of the kids in their school we meet are kind of assholes.
I say a lot. I think only a couple, but I think they are a representation of that.
But they're the ones we
see
the most.
Yes.
Like that fucking guy who gives her alcohol and doesn't tell her.
Yeah.
What a fucking douchebag. What a tosser. Like, you just, it bothers me. It bothered me. And I kind of was reading it and I was like, oh, we're really being invited to, we're being invited here to learn a little something about a culture and to kind of, see it for what it is. And they had a really clever juxtaposition with some of the other characters not really respecting it and not seeing it for what it was and coming off as massive dickheads.
Yeah, there was one specific line I isolated, which I isolated just for, like, this is how effective a line as in an intentionally negative way is. One of the characters literally says to Kamala, "No offense, but you smell like curry." Yeah. And that is like a very big, especially in England, and I guess in America, I assume as well, but it's a very big racist comment. Like,
that was the kind of thing that you would have heard when we were in primary school in the UK in the noughties.
Yeah.
That's something you absolutely would have heard white kids say to people from India, Pakistan,
Not even that accurately. Anyone who wasn't white. I think that it was so ignorant of that time that that shit would come out even when it wasn't accurate.
Yeah, 100%. Which is probably when it's the most egregious. If you're going to be racist, at least be fucking accurate, eh? That's not what I believe.
I think I generally read a Reddit post at some point, and it did tickle me a bit. It was someone who was racist, but in a way where they knew all the details of the race and community they were being racist
like
towards.
You've done the reading.
And the person, it was from the perspective of the person who the racism was aimed at. And they were like, I could not help but be impressed with the knowledge they had to be racist to me.
Like he's done his reading. He knows what he's talking about. And he's still a cock.
Yeah. But you got impressed by that level of commitment to the bit.
Yeah, no, I mean,
to the horrible, evil bit.
So the story, right?
The story for me, I can sum up as there were parts I really liked and there was parts that I didn't like, which took me out of it.
So there's something that I'm going to say right now which goes against things that I've said in the past, and I feel like this is me having my cake and eating it, which is that when we've had comic books that have tried too hard to explain the acquisition of power, like that Flashpoint, where they really go into the fake science of how he gives himself his powers again.
Yeah.
I found that really annoying. And then here she kind of falls over, has a vision, and has powers. And I kind of feel like they could have done a bit more to explain it.
This is really interesting from my perspective because I know exactly what happened, but not because of the comic. I know the timeline of the character and like what happened. So
you actually know what's happening here.
I thought it was going to be interesting to see how much they actually said about what happened, and again how you would react to it as a non-fan who was not knowing all the stuff. So what happened was there's a group in the MCU called the Inhumans.
Yeah.
And they are kind of like, to minimize it, is saying they're kind of an X-Men type group, right?
Oh, so she's a mutant.
Not mutant inhuman, but that's like they are conflated because they're so similar.
Right.
So what it is they are a race of people who were created by some basically godlike creatures eons ago. And what it is they hundreds of years ago
You're struggling with this one, aren't you?
To explain, hundreds of years ago they integrated with the humans. So what you have got now is you've got humans who have DNA from this previous civilization that were integrated with the humans. So part of the inhuman culture is they are born without powers, but then they're exposed to this thing called the Terrigen Mist. So the mist creates your powers. It unlocks your superpowers. So in this Inhumans race, their whole culture is about like rite of passage, exposed to the mist, no idea what's going to happen. Like with the mutants, you could get cool powers or you could become a monster or anywhere in between.
Yeah.
So it's all that kind of culture. What happened in the Marvel universe at this time is the king of the Inhumans, a guy called Black Bolt, he basically dropped Terrigen Mist bombs on New York and New Jersey and around the world.
Okay.
With the point being that, so they're kind of like the more pure, your more pedigree Inhumans, but they knew that there were humans with like latent Inhuman DNA
that they could manipulate,
which would be activated by the Terrigen Mist. There was a whole thing about the Inhumans versus like the rest of the Marvel world. So his kind of thing was like, if I make a bunch of Inhumans in the world, then there'd be more of us and they have to kind of more acknowledge us, on the global stage.
So how deep a cut is this?
It depends what you mean, like in relative to...
So if you were a casual comic book consumer who just read a couple of issues or whatever they could get their hands on and whatever looked interesting in the comic book store, would you generally have knowledge of this?
So the problem with this is, we're getting into the weeds here a bit, right?
That's cool. That's what we're here for.
The problem with this is, if you were reading at the time, the whole thing with the Inhumans was the big crossover event. So,
right. So does this tie into a lot of what was happening? In
a sense, yeah. So this was happening, and they were like, also, we're going to create like at least one new mainstream superhero because of this event in the big Inhumans Marvel crossover.
So is Kamala Khan the kind of big named one?
She became the biggest named Inhuman.
Isn't she the one? So just indulge me for a moment. You know that Spider-Man run that we read?
Yep.
This is the person that they kill off for no reason, isn't it?
Yep, she died, and the reason was because, so the Inhumans...
Did she perma-die?
No, she's back now.
Right, cool.
But the reason is because they wanted to change her from an Inhuman to a mutant. So they've retconned her to be like, oh, you were Inhuman, but now you actually had mutant DNA as well. So now we brought you back, you're more mutant than... So here's the back.
So is she within the X-Men kind of umbrella now?
She literally just happened very recently, so I think they are now incorporating her. Or she's just her own superhero, but she's a mutant. Like kind of like Deadpool is a mutant, and he's kind of with the X-Men, but not really.
Well, he's with whichever X-Men they can afford to get the movie rights to.
Well, in the movie. But this is a big part of the Inhumans. They've gone up and down in popularity because of the larger Marvel like real world situation. So there was a point where they were becoming quite big because Marvel were making MCU. They started MCU in 2009. They created Ms.Marvel, Kamala Khan in 2014. At this point in time, they did not have the movie rights to X-Men. So they were building up the Inhumans, who have been around for a while before.
To be a new X-Men franchise.
To be like,
get it.
Right, we haven't got the X-Men, let's do the Inhumans.
Get it.
Turned out the Inhumans crashed and failed because they just bungled it. Like they just it fell apart because they couldn't be asked to make it proper. They made a bad TV. It was meant to be a film, then it was a TV show, and the TV show sucked. So they just missed it. Now they've got the X-Men back.
Yeah.
So now it's like, Inhumans, who? What? Like, who cares?
So just thinking about this character and her power, particularly her moveset, her powers.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a bit of Ant-Man here.
Yep. I was leaning a bit more fantastic, Mr. Fantastic.
Yes.
But she's literally between those two, really, isn't she?
And good solid character. I think we've seen so much of New York in the MCU because Tony Stark's based in New York, isn't he?
Almost all of them are based in New York.
Doctor Strange is based in New York. Peter Parker's based in New York.
The Fantastic Four, Doctor Strange, Daredevil, Punisher most of the time.
Yeah.
The Defenders, so Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Jessica Jones.
So just thinking about it, right, we've got this really, I think actually quite a well-imagined character set somewhere that's kind of New York, but not quite. Like I think the idea, basically what I'm saying is, Marvel, get off your fucking asses and make a Kamala Khan film because I would go and see it.
So they made a TV show. The TV show's already happened.
Is it good?
It was pretty good, yeah. It was good. It was very similar to this style of this comic.
Yeah.
Very coming of age, like discovering her powers, very strong like Muslim representation in it as well. The actress or actor, we're not saying actress anymore, are we? I don't know.
We did a whole bit about it last week, didn't it? Actor works.
The actor who plays Kamala Khan, she is not only, I think she's Pakistani herself, but I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not going to commit to that. But she might even be Muslim as well. Again, I'm not 100% on that either.
Yeah.
She's very close to the character in a lot of ways. Also, she was a massive fan of Kamala Khan.
Rad.
So she got the role to play one of her favorite comic book characters. And
I'm fully on board with this.
she's also writing the latest Kamala Khan run, where she's now a mutant.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
So she's actually... That's super cool, man.
Yeah. And what's interesting as well is in the live action one. So the film coming out soon is called The Marvels, and it is between...
Oh, we've taught... So this is why we're doing this, isn't it?
Yeah, in a sense, yeah.
Do you know, I'm so out of tune with the MCU and with like TV and movies that I often don't realise that we're doing SEO tie-in stuff, Ryan.
I mean, that's the best way.
Like, I often don't realise that that's what's happening. But of course, that's why you've even told me we're doing this to tie in with a film, and then I'm like, they should really make a film out of this. Fucking moron.
Again, we have our different strengths when on this podcast.
Fucking A. If it was me doing this podcast, Ryan, we're like 40 episodes in?
It's 42, 41, 42, one of those.
I would still be talking about Why the Last Man. If it was just me on my own, this would have been
and Pokemon anime.
Yeah.
A manga.
This would have been a series of essays about the Pokemon manga and Why the Last Man.
And Scott Pilgrim, which hint, nudge, nudge. Maybe reference next week's.
Little road of flowers. Oh, we love it.
But yeah, so the Marvels, it's Kamala Khan and it's Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, and a third character whose super name is Spectrum. Maria Rambeau, I think, is the character name. They're all MCU. They've all been in separate things, and now this one's going to bring them all together.
They're finally having their femme fatale Avengers moment.
The best way to describe it, unfortunately, The Boys TV show kind of ruined a bit by putting a hat on it, which was they do it in a very kind of capitalistic kind of way where it's like, girls get it done. All the female superheroes doing what the men can't kind of thing. So I think Marvel had to genuinely be like, we need to like make this actually good and not just rely on the representation being the only thing about it.
Yeah, because it falls flat, doesn't it? It feels tokenistic.
It can be pandering if it's not done well.
Well, do you know what? I will because I know you're probably going to go see that film in the cinema.
Probably, yeah.
I'm now going to ask to come with you to that because I liked the character.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
I really like. I think there was this fun moment where she was getting quippy with a bad guy, and we see her internal monologue where she says, "Oh, I'm usually too scared to ask a teacher to go to the toilet, and now I'm doing this." And I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool."
I think it really speaks to her power being like embiggening, like, and the word embiggening, right? I had to think about this. Is that a real word?
No,
because I don't know if it is or not, because I have a memory of it possibly being actually created by the Simpsons. There's a bit in the Simpsons where they're talking about the founder of Springfield, Jebediah something, I think.
Jebediah Springfield.
Yeah, and he there's a film of him that they're showing to the class.
Is it embiggening or imbiggening?
M-E-M.
I'm Googling it.
Yeah.
So keep talking.
So they show him a film and he's like talking to this kid. He's like, never forget, even the smallest spirit can embiggen the largest of men, or something like that. And the teachers literally go, embiggen, is that a word? And someone goes, that sounds like a perfectly cromulent word to me. So they created cromulent because that's just like, it's the joke of like a fake word.
Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that it is now that somebody's coined it and it's in use means that it's a word now. It's considered to be informal and humorous, is how dictionary.com describes it.
I think it might have been created by The Simpsons over 20 years ago.
I have something that can be really useful here.
Is it a dictionary?
Yeah, but it's so what I have here, Ryan, quite an interesting dictionary, because obviously one of the things you can do if you have a relatively large collection of dictionaries, which I don't anymore, and I am expanding my collection once more.
Oh, thank God.
Because who doesn't want a big dictionary collection? If you get enough dictionaries from different points in time, you can start to work out when certain words entered the corpus.
It's like a time machine.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's a fun way of doing it. So I've got here in front of me a dictionary that was published and printed in 1999.
Wow, okay.
This is a relatively modern dictionary, but still a bit older.
How many podcasts can you get proper dictionary action like this?
I know, right? It is not in the 99 Collins dictionary.
I think it was created by The Simpsons.
Dude, I mean, The Simpsons are kind of the Shakespeare of the modern day in terms of coining words and creating stuff.
Yep. How many references and things come from them as well. So
yeah, it's wild. I mean, they're a cultural touch point for a lot of people, aren't they?
It's a shame that it fell off such a cliff in terms of quality.
Apparently it's good again now.
I've heard this and I'm like, I literally saw a thumbnail for a YouTube video and the title was literally, The Simpsons are good again. And I was like, should I watch this to view this argument? But it was like an hour-long video. So it felt to me like, you know, the animal trap of like the box on the stick and there's like a food under the box. That felt to me like, are you baiting me in to watch an hour-long video because you've like dangled this concept that The Simpsons might be good again? Like,
yeah, because let's face it, we all want The Simpsons to be good again.
I don't know if I've got time for it now. Like, if you're bad for plus 10 years, I'm really hesitant to jump back on board, you know?
It's interesting, though, because Matt Groening has consistently made quite interesting stuff.
Futurama's, I think, his best creation.
Disenchantment.
I didn't get on with Disenchantment.
I liked it.
I've heard a lot of people like it. I know a lot of people who like it, but it didn't hit for me.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't bother with the last season because it had been so long since the previous one that I'd forgotten what happened. And so I tried to go from the start again and I was like, oh, I just can't with this.
Yeah.
But when it first dropped, I think I binged it in the pandemic, if I'm being completely honest.
I think a lot of people did.
Yeah, but in Bigland.
Yeah. I think for me, the dialogue in this comic, that was the point where some of it took me out. Like the actual context of some of the context of the dialogue are some of the high points for me. But then also some of the over expositional dialogue took me out of it.
Do you know what? We are coming from, it's so weird because this hasn't happened in a while where we're coming from completely different ends of the room. I quite liked the dialogue.
Again, I liked it in parts. Like, I've generally made notes about the parts I liked and the parts I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't notice anything particularly poor.
I've got my notes. So
yeah, no, this is what this is. Yeah, this is what notes are for.
There was one early on where she literally says in her own turn. No, she's speaking to someone and she says, "Oh yeah, my chances of becoming an intergalactic superhero are like worse than me becoming popular or whatever." And for me, that was like we know the story. We know the blurb at the very least. We know this is going to happen. It felt like, what was the point of making such an obvious foreshadowing for something that we know? It's like, what are the odds that she would say that days before getting superpowers?
But it's also wrapped up in a joke because she says, again, it's one of the things that I lauded about it is that's the point at which she makes the joke about the Western beauty standards.
Yeah, and that, like, again, so that's a good part, but the fact she's referencing it getting superpowers specifically is like,
all in one utterance, man. I mean, isn't that interesting that it kind of hits such peaks and troughs in one utterance?
I mean, to go along with your point as well, another note I made is one where the male character, I can't remember his name, but he's like the best friend, he says about his brother, and he literally... Bruno, yes. Where he literally says to his brother, he says, "Vic, if you weren't my brother, I'd punch you," or something like that. Very heavy-handed.
Yes.
This is the relationship between the characters kind of thing.
Yeah, and now that you say it, I did clock that. But again, sometimes...
I recognize tools like that we've got limited page space. We need to get the information in. Let's just cut a corner and get this in. The rest of the comic was good enough that I'm not holding it against it, but I still think if we're dissecting it to this level, then it's worth mentioning. No,
it's valid, and I often defend being very nitpicky in the same way, don't I? So it's hard for me to challenge you.
Also, at one point they reference a video possibly going on MeTube.
I know.
I was like,
I know. Oh my god!
I can just imagine the writers, or the one writer, I suppose, but the writer being like, "Oh god, I need something for YouTube. I can't use YouTube. What do I do? MeTube." Right, off to the pub.
And there's another reference to social media as well, and they do something weird with it there. They did a thing in the dialogue with this that I really liked. There's when Kamala comes home from her little late night jaunt, her brother's really worried that somebody has done something to her, and he says, "Oh, do you want me to get the lads from the mosque and we'll beat the snot out of them?" And I liked it. For the one reason, because it's something that I bang on about all of the time.
No censored swears.
No censored swears.
Yeah.
It's quite obvious that the well-worn phrase there is beat the shit out of somebody.
Yeah.
And they could have had him say that, but they would have had to bleep it out. And so they found a different word that worked in context, I think it had the effect of giving her brother a little bit of verbal freshness. Like he's speaking, he's not always using well-worn aphorisms. He's speaking in his own voice. They picked a word that worked. They didn't have to bleep out a bunch of swears. They didn't have to do a swear because clearly they didn't want to here. There's no swearing.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was really cool. And again, like so many times I've gotten really upset about bleeped out swears. And they found a really elegant, nice little way to get around it. And I think it made that character a bit more human for me.
Yeah, I think language like that may take me out a little bit because I'm like, I don't know people who speak like that.
Yeah.
But if it's the consistent style of the comic, then I'm more on board. I'm like, this comic's not doing swears. They're doing other words in place of them that still contextually make sense. I'm fine with it.
I think it was the perfect workaround. Yeah. And again, it's little things like that I think elevated this. For me, genuinely, this was elevated a bit above what I'd come to expect from modern Marvel. Like I think this was really well drawn.
Yeah.
I really think this was well executed is the word I'm looking for. I think this was a really well executed comic, and I think you are right. Exposition is what it is, and it's sort of kind of once you're reading with an eye towards it, it can be a bit annoying, can't it?
Yeah. Well, again, it takes me out of it because I see and recognize, oh, you're doing this to tell me, the audience, this.
Yes.
Like, so I'm aware of it. I did like in terms of the actual story, like this is, as we've said before, it's a coming of age, thing with the dissension between the child and the parents. I thought it was interesting is I think this is aimed at a younger audience, absolutely. So when she's complaining about not being able to go to parties and stuff, and the parents being overbearing, and not allowing her to do this stuff, I recognize that I think we are at an age where we are more closely relating to the parents. The point of it absolutely is meant to be like, poor Kamala not being able to go to this party. Whereas I think we're at an age where like, I agree with the parents. I don't think she should be going to this party. Like, it's probably bad.
Fully. And like they... Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And they do a really good job of making her dad very strict, but also very kind. There's that moment where they're talking and he kind of says, I just want to make sure you're okay and I'm worried about you and can we just talk about this properly? And then he gets to the end and he goes, you're still grounded though, you need to go to the mosque.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, but that's really, like, that's actually pretty solid parenting. He's setting really, like, defined boundaries, but he's also doing a lot of child-led stuff there. Like, it just...
I think as a society now, we are very aware of the bad points of the two extremes.
Yeah.
The far too strict, overbearing parents have their negative connotations, but negative results, but also the parents who are so laissez-faire, like, you do whatever you want. I'm your friend more than your parent.
Yeah.
We know that's bad as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's very... If you're going to represent good parents, they have to be that middle ground. Same with Miles Morales and his parents.
Yeah.
Right? They're strict, but try and be fair as well.
And the same with, what's his face? Invincible.
Yep. Very, well, that has a lot of other
I know
related
there's
things.
Other stuff going on there, but actually within the home,
yeah,
his parents are pretty good people,
Up until a point.
I know Daddy did some murdering, right? I get it. Not good. Don't do murders, people.
Especially when it's the Justice League of your world. Spoilers for Invincible.
Oh, imagine just murdering the whole Justice League of America. Are they still the Justice League of America?
No, that's the older version. So that was literally like an older lineup. So that was Superman, maybe Batman, and like some others, like old version Green Lantern, who was not like the intergalactic kind. He was like he had a magical Green Lantern.
He
like
was a domestic Green Lantern.
Yeah, who they actually retconned into being a gay character. So
cool.
Yeah, so one of those things like they are now doing more stuff with now, so he's become more interesting. But I think originally he was a bit boring, so they replaced him with the new Green Lanterns, who were the space police, essentially.
So talking about that, because that's something that, I mean, there's some undertones of that here. I think it's more interesting when they do what they've done here, where they give you a brand new character, but they take on the mantle of an older character, instead of just retconning somebody from the 50s to make them more interesting to a modern audience.
Yeah.
That's really preferable to me.
I think
it's like... Because I imagine the Ms.Marvel mantle wasn't particularly well liked one.
Well, it used to be Carol Danvers, and then basically she got upgraded to Captain Marvel, which was really interesting because there was an original Captain Marvel,
a dude.
He was a guy, and I don't know a lot about him, but I do know he was one of the few, if maybe one of the only Marvel characters or big superhero characters. He actually died from cancer, and they actually made
Sucks.
but they made like a proper like depiction of someone actually going through that and like being surrounded by his friends and family, and slowly relinquishing to it and everything. And she was very close to the Captain Marvel character, so they naturally made her the new Captain Marvel. But her Carol Danvers' history before she became Captain Marvel is definitely riddled with like sexist treatment of a female character.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of bad stuff. Not a lot, but there's some significant bad moments that happened to her that probably shouldn't have.
This is almost a PR moment for Marvel then, where they're saying, look, we're reusing this old mantle, but don't worry, they're cool.
Yeah. I think what helped especially is that Kamala Khan, she's a fan of Captain Marvel and the Avengers as a whole, and that's something I want to talk about separately. But what I think is good is that she's not just automatically like the sidekick who gets promoted or anything.
Yeah.
She's not just literally following in the footsteps.
This isn't a Batman-Robin situation.
Exactly. And she is literally assuming she's choosing the mantle of Ms. Marvel because she's a fan of it, and it's not being used. So it makes more of a sense of like there would be a fan in this world of real life Avengers.
Yeah.
But then for me, I know I kind of struggle between like how cool is it that she is a stand-in for the fans literally reading the comics. I'm not sure how like cool it is that she kind of fawns over the Avengers and stuff.
I mean, they're painting her as a nerd, aren't they?
Yeah. Luckily, she does become more disillusioned with them as they go on. Like she's becoming more of her own
that's interesting.
character. So they did a thing a few years later where it was almost a kind of Civil War-esque kind of thing, where it was about young superheroes. So it was the topic of debate was, should these under 18s be doing superhero vigilante stuff? And it kind of became like a pro and con kind of thing.
Yeah.
And she becomes a bit disillusioned with the Avengers because a lot of them side on the not letting them superhero.
Yeah.
So they build on the character in really interesting ways.
Where does this stand in like chronologically within that Civil War thing? Is this pre or post Civil War?
This must have been post first Civil War. Civil War is like well before 2014. I'm almost
But this
certain.
is before the second Civil War because Carol Danvers was only involved in the second one, wasn't she?
Yes, and I think Ms. Marvel is a bit present in Civil War too. Like she's not a main character or anything, but she's the person she idolizes is on one side of the argument, so she had some relation that way.
And we're seeing a long-haired Carol Danvers here, aren't we? Or are we seeing a short-haired Carol Danvers?
I think we're seeing a long-haired one, but we don't see the actual Carol Danvers, so we don't know if it's like previous footage or what she's used to seeing.
I'm pretty sure the Carol Danvers that appears to her in that vision is long-haired, but then the poster on her wall is short-haired.
So it might be a case of she's thinking about the one she's known for longer, the image of the person that she's known for longer, and she might have just recently cut her hair. For as important as that is, but like, I get what you mean. Like chronologically, it's a marker of the character.
I'm
like,
just trying to slot it into the
pre
timeline.
and post, yeah.
Because pre and post Civil War 2 is a big deal in the Marvel Universe, isn't it? It changed a lot of things.
It should have been. It wasn't. It didn't have that much.
Oh, did it not change as much as I think it did?
It changed for certain characters that we've covered. So like Hulk obviously was a big thing for Civil War 2 and Iron Man. And
we've never talked about Iron Man, which is wild to me.
Well, I said they haven't. You've made that point before, and I said they haven't done any Iron Man stuff, so we haven't tied in.
We should just talk about because I've never read an Iron Man comic.
The ones I've read haven't been great. And the problem is he's one of those characters, he's been going on since the 60s.
Yeah.
So they've kind of run out of steam in terms of like what to do with him now.
I'd be really, because you know the original Iron Man in the big bulky gold suit?
The origin, yeah.
I'd be super interested to talk about that original origin story and the way the origin stories have changed.
Well, that's like a larger topic, isn't it? So,
yeah.
So the one we can get into for sure. Might need to do a little bit of research, and when we've got a bit more free time, we can collaborate on getting the research together and then talk about it.
Yeah, because it's just interesting because he's such a and I know obviously he was kind of the reason that he's a huge thing in the MCU is because he wasn't super in vogue at the time and they had the rights to him.
Yeah,
so they made him what he is now via the MCU. But obviously he's such a big part of what happened over the past 10 years in the MCU, and we've just not talked about him.
I think the problem for me is similar to Peter Parker Spider-Man. Because he's such a big part. And again, same with like Batman and Superman. When superheroes get too big, they get so big that they don't want to take risks.
It's like the banks in 2008, too big to fail.
Well, we've had that discussion where I misinterpreted that as like not allowing them to fail, whereas as you said, is if they fail, everything else fails.
Yeah, absolutely.
With Marvel and DC, they're such big characters. They're like, we can't risk doing anything too different
because we'll bring the whole house down.
Well, yeah, they're scared of like these safe sales being like risked and not game. But again, for me, they just make them more stagnant and that go on. So then I gravitate towards like these newer superheroes where there's less need to like go safely with them.
And it's interesting because beyond the religious stuff that's quite present here, they're not really taking a lot of risks with Kamala Khan. Like this is really bread and butter superhero stuff.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about if you are at the time in 2014, if you're going so far as to make a brand new like main title Muslim superhero, the idea I think is that if you make everything else like run of the mill, then you're going different in this other way, but you're rooting the character in the tropes of the superhero.
It's like if you're wearing a statement piece. Like if you're going out, John Mayer said this, when he wears like a big robe or something, like a Visvim robe, he's like, you better just wear t-shirt and jeans with it because you're spending all of your points on this statement piece, so everything else needs to be super grounded, right?
Yeah.
And this is a very grounded kind of neighborhood Spidey superhero origin story. She's not she's not doing Avengers level shit yet. She's rescuing her buddy's brother.
Yeah.
From a like
she's a street level superhero at this.
Yeah, and I think that's cool, and we don't see as much. Well, from what I've seen, from what we've read, we don't see as much of that these days. Like a lot of the modern superhero stuff, the stakes are very high from the start.
Yeah, it depends on the superhero because some of my favorites are still quite entrenched in that. So like Daredevil's one of my favorites, and he's very much a street hero, although he does a lot of like magic ninja stuff as well sometimes. Spider-Man, I think when he's at his best, is a street superhero.
Yeah.
They do a lot of stuff with him, like interdimensional stuff or like like magical stuff with Satan bloody annulling his marriage and all that bollocks.
Oh God, don't.
But there are some street superheroes who tell good stories. Jessica Jones is a very good one. She's literally a private detective with
Punisher?
powers. Punisher is very street level. Punisher they do an interesting thing with, and I might make a video on this once I launch Comic Stan, trademarked. But,
soon to be known as Comic Stan.
Soon to be known as. The thing with Punisher, which I've noticed, is they literally go in waves where they'll do a run, which is very typical Punisher. He's killing bad guys and all that stuff. Very down to the brim and just exciting action kind of thing. Then they'll do something where they completely change or like put the character in a completely different area.
Yeah.
So prime example, at one point he died and became an angel fighting demons. Or at one point he came back as a Frankenstein, but he was called Frankencastle because his name is Frank Castle.
That's okay. I'm there for the pun.
Those are some of the worst ones. But then one that was really good. So again, post Civil War II, there's another reference to that. James Rhodes, Rhodey, died in Civil War II.
Did he?
Yeah. The Punisher got his War Machine armor and became War Machine to a level where the rest of the Avengers were like, what the fuck are you doing? Give us back that armor. But Frank Castle was like, nah, I think I'm going to go to like other countries and like kill dictators and stuff like that.
Because he's a badass.
Yeah. So, well, there's a moral debate with Punisher, which I think makes him such an interesting character, to be honest. But yeah, so he does stuff like that. The latest run, the one they just ended very recently, he became the head of the Hand, the evil ninja group. Daredevil fights normally. They were like, we enjoy murderers, and you're one of the biggest murderers in the world. So do you want to lead the group? And Frank was like, we're only killing bad guys. And they were like, yeah, you're the leader, so you can set where you want. And he's like, all right, cool. And then Daredevil's like, what the fuck are you doing, Frank? Like, basically, every time he does something outside of his wheelhouse, and the rest of the Marvel universe goes, what the fuck are you doing, Frank? Like, get back in your streets. Like,
I mean, I kind of rate that. That's actually quite fun. But then, just to have that one dissenting voice, But
then it's so interesting where you go, again, they just swap back and forth. So they'll change up the character and then they go back. And I don't know what the wider reaction is. I like the swings. I like there's like, all right, we're on the street level one now. Let's see him just kill some evil people on the streets. And then it's like, oh, now he's got superpowers. Like, I like the swing back and forth.
Does Punisher not have superpowers?
No, he's like his superpowers that he's the most badass character of all time. Like,
is
the baddest
he
human.
Is he completely yoked?
Yeah, he's an ex-Marine, so
So
obviously.
he is yoked.
Yeah,
He's a good...
I mean, every superhero is very much like...
Except for Superman in Flashpoint.
Yeah, but that... like,
emaciated Superman is my favourite.
And like I said at the time, that for me, for superhero fans, seeing him like that was the shock value.
Yeah,
Whereas for you, I think it was not as shocking because you're not as...
I'm not as entrenched in it, am I?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But again, like, a good thing about Kamala Khan, she's quite a thin character as well. And I don't mean thin just like not fat. I mean thin like she's not a muscular super
Spindly.
character. And even a lot of the female superheroes, they might not be as muscular as the men, but a lot of the women superheroes may not be as muscular, but they're still muscular to a degree. So I think it's interesting with Kamala, they went the route of like, she still looks like a normal teenage girl.
She doesn't have an athletic build, does she?
No.
Like even looking at like Carol Danvers, she's quite athletic, isn't she?
And like compared to like, again, Spider-Man, Peter Parker, like in the movies, I don't know how true this is to the comics, but in the movies, he develops abs as part of his powers.
What in the
Tobey Maguire, yeah.
Overnight, he's just like, I'm fucking yoked.
What an beyond all the other powers, like, oh, I just become jacked overnight. Like, what an amazing power in itself.
I love that She-Hulk is just completely yoked. Like, that's so much fun.
You can't be a Hulk and not be jacked. Like, that's literally the power.
But again, we've never talked about She-Hulk, and she's fucking fascinating. She's so interesting.
She-Hulk season 2 will be out at some point, so we'll definitely...
Can we do it?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Great. I love that a good chunk of this podcast has just been you and I deciding future topics.
I mean, isn't that how podcasts kind of work? Like these kind of podcasts?
They
like,
get a bit self-referential after a while, don't they?
Yeah, we just hope that you like us enough that you're coming along with a self-referential
You're
ride.
there for the ride, yeah.
So, talking about how it was like a kind of by-the-numbers superhero story, there were points that I thought were good that went out of that a bit. For example, the failure that she has in like issue 4, where she tries to superhero and is not very good at it.
Yeah, she just didn't do a very good job, did she?
And to the point where it's not just that she didn't stop the bad guys, she was there to rescue someone and had to run away. Yeah. And I think that's more impactful of like, you are literally abandoning the person you're trying to save from these bad people. So I thought that was a bit refreshing because normally I think
totally.
If this was like, you know, Spider-Man, it would have been like, and he beats it's his origin, he beats the bad guys and now moves on.
Yeah, I mean, the adversity that they face is that it's sometimes a bit difficult. But here, you're right. And I enjoyed issue 4. I think issue 4 was probably my favourite out of all of them.
And what I especially enjoyed then going into issue 5, she didn't reconcile this issue by believing in herself more.
No, she got down to brass tacks.
She strategized. She learned her powers. She's like, what can I, like, it was almost clinical in a way where I appreciated because it felt more realistic. It's like, right, what can I do? How do my powers work? And let's strategize to actually like get this done. And then what she does in the issue 5, she doesn't then beat the bad guys. She focuses on getting the hostage essentially out, just rescuing them. She's not beating everyone. She's saving the day, but she's not like, and then I beat the bad guys and everything was fine.
She defines what her mission is
exactly.
really clearly and works out how, you're absolutely right. And that's interesting, isn't it?
And the recent comparison I can make why the opposite happened was like Blue Beetle. That one. He just believed in himself more and then the scarab worked when it didn't. Like,
he just kind of, I mean, Jamie kind of meandered through, didn't he?
He was like, why can't everyone get along?
As did, what's his face? Mark in Invincible a little bit.
Yeah.
He kind of meanders through a bit.
Yes, but we didn't see like a significant like, and now everything's fine. Because the thing about Invincible is it's never fine. It's always ongoing.
We've done 2 kind of coming of age hero stories on the trot, right?
Yeah.
What we see with Mark in Invincible is we see him just hit the ground running and do hero work, and we just kind of see him continually succeed. But we never really see him doing things. We see him having just done things.
Yeah.
Right? What we see here with Kamala is her actually really getting down to the machinations of what it means to be a hero. And we see her like go and do her first thing. And that is like a 2-issue arc.
I think the 2 comparisons you made are the 2 extremes. Like the 2...
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the word? Like fighting against the trope or doing differently.
Yeah.
So in Invincible, they're kind of shining a light on like, and he's done some supering and now back to the story. Whereas this, as you say, that it's literally like how is this all happening? I appreciated that. Half and half on this point. when she stops the mugging in the shop,
Yeah.
she definitely causes more monetary damage to the shop than what could have been stolen from the cash register.
Fucking
And they don't acknowledge that.
No.
And I thought if they just acknowledged that, that would have made it a little bit better.
It would have been funny.
Yeah, I liked how she kind of bungled the mugging stopping. I liked, this sounds weird, I liked that she got shot because I did not see that coming. It genuinely surprised me. And I was like, I appreciated that.
Although there is a tiny little plot inconsistency there.
Sure.
The brother makes it quite clear that there's no bullets in the gun, and then it goes off.
To me, so I think
Did you read it that he was lying? Because that's the obvious. That's obviously what.
Or he was such an idiot that he didn't realize there was one in the chamber.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? And,
But he might have looked at the mag.
It would have been nice for that to have just been made a bit more clear. And again, we're getting really deep into nitpicking here.
Yeah, and it's still doing enough different stuff and subverting the tropes that I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed reading it. It's so weird because before, we always have a brief conversation before we start recording. I would love for you to just turn up, set a mic up, sit down and be like, that would be hilarious.
And, hello, welcome back to the...
But I said to you before we started recording, didn't I? I was like, I don't really think I've got a lot to say about this one. And now we've gotten into it and I've had nothing but things to say.
I did say that I had enough notes I had such like things I liked and things I didn't like. I thought there was going to be enough conversation in that.
Yeah.
And again, just some final notes on like, almost final notes, the dialogue again towards the end. I made notes on that of like,
right,
the not dialogue, but the bad guy is literally wearing a shirt saying I'm the bad guy.
Yeah.
And I had the thought of like, who's that for? Like, what was the point of that?
The bad guy was like a chicken person though.
No, not the reveal at the end. The head guy of who's holding the brother hostage.
The guy with the mohawk.
Yeah. He's got the I'm the bad guy shirt, and at some point he says, I guess we have to fight to the death or something. And I was like, that's taking me out a little bit.
It's like Spider-Man levels of quippy, isn't it?
Exactly.
Whedon-esque.
A bit Whedon-esque, yeah. Which it's a bit Whedon-esque, but again, it was the consistent style of the comic. I really liked the reveal of the Chicken Man.
Well, so can you give me some context for this?
No idea at all. I've never seen this character before.
So you are just as lost as I am.
It got to the point where it was about to reveal the inventor.
Yeah.
And I made two notes right at the end. One was, I liked that he was like Mr. Edison. I was like, of course the inventor's name is Mr. Edison.
Yeah.
That's a fun thing. And I was like, and here's the reveal of the real supervillain who will be later enemy kind of thing. And then it just showed a giant chicken man. And I was like, what the fuck is this? This is amazing. I was like shocked with happiness.
It was a what the fuck moment for me. And this isn't a lot of particularly long run, is it? Like 14 issues or something?
It goes for like 2-ish years or like overlaps into 2 years.
Yeah, I think it only goes up. I only saw it go up to like 14 issues or something.
So I did read the following issue after this, which interestingly,
do we see the Chicken Man?
We see the Chicken Man again. So
okay.
It's a Wolverine tie-in, like Wolverine's there.
What is Logan there?
He's following a missing student from the mutant school.
Is it Short Logan?
Yeah, yes, it's proper Logan. It's proper Wolverine. But what's funny is she meets the Chicken Man. I thought a bit too quickly. I was like, give me more breadcrumbs leading to the Chicken Man. Turns out
corn kernels.
It turns out it's a clone of Thomas Edison, but
but they fucked it up.
They accidentally got chicken DNA or chicken feather into the test tube.
Why is there chicken DNA floating about in your lab?
And what's funny is the inventor is really salty about anyone pointing out that he's a chicken. He gets really worked up about it.
That's so good.
It's fun. I generally was like, I might read more of this. I want to see where this goes. So yeah, Chicken Man is the villain.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, I think. Oh, and one last thing, I like the mannequin joke. Oh, the visual gag with the mannequin.
Yes.
Because it had the simple face, but closer up, and I was like, that's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's pretty much covered it. Ms.Marvel 2014, I would recommend. I think if you're interested in this at all, your interest is going to be rewarded. Reading.
2 thumbs up from me. Really enjoyed it. I had a good time with it. Love talking about it, actually.
And there'll be more Kamala Khan stuff because she's a popular MCU character, so we'll be doing more stuff.
I'll do some more.
Yeah.
I could go some more. Cool. Well, thank you so much for listening. If you want to send us an email, you can do so at comicliterate@gmail.com. I think entries for the costume competition are now closed, so we'll reveal our winner next time on that one.
And if there are no entries, we'll just pick a random person off the internet.
Oh, wouldn't it be great if we just picked a random address and sent them a medal? If you'd like to leave us a review, make it a 5-star. Do it wherever you get your podcasts from. We make shorts. They're good. I like them. I think you'll like them too. So you should probably watch some of those. They're on TikTok and YouTube under the Comic Literate podcast, I think.
Yes, Comic Literate, yeah.
Cool. So thanks ever so much for listening and good night.
Thank you. Goodbye.